It was supposed to be an ordinary moment, the kind that disappears as quickly as it happens. The sun was dipping low behind the hills, washing the ranch in amber light, and the smell of hay hung thick in the air. She had been helping near the stable, moving carefully, unfamiliar with the uneven ground. When her boot slipped on loose dirt, time folded in on itself. Instinct took over before thought could catch up. The rancher reached out and grabbed her wrist. The contact lasted only a second, but it felt louder than thunder. She froze. Her breath caught sharply, and her eyes lifted to his, not wide with drama, but narrowed with something far. Heavier, awareness, discomfort. A line had been crossed. Even if he hadn't seen it coming, she pulled her hand free, stepping back as if the space between them had suddenly turned dangerous. "Your hands." "That was wrong," she said. Her voice wasn't raised. That was what unsettled him most. There was no anger in it, only certainty. The words landed like a verdict. He opened his mouth to apologize, and he did, quickly, clumsily, but the air had already changed. The horses shifted in their stalls, snorting and stamping, their ears pinned back. A cold breeze slipped through the barn, though the doors were still shut. He told himself he was imagining it. He told himself guilt had a way of exaggerating things. Still, when she turned away, he noticed how carefully she kept her distance, how her shoulders stayed tense, as if the world itself had become unpredictable. Shame burned through him, sharp and sudden. He hadn't meant harm. He had only reacted. But intention didn't erase impact. And the ranch seemed to understand that better than he did. As dusk deepened, strange sounds began to rise from the land. Wood creaked where no one walked. Metal chains rattled softly, though the air was still. The rancher worked late, trying to drown his thoughts in routine. But every task felt heavier, every movement watched. When he finally washed his hands at the pump, the water ran cold instantly, numbing his skin. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw dark stains swirling away in the stream, though his hands were clean. That night sleep refused him. The memory replayed itself again and again, not as it had happened, but distorted, his grip tighter, her fear sharper. Outside his window, the cattle stood unnaturally silent. No insects chirped, no wind stirred. Then came the sound of footsteps circling the house, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside his door. He held his breath, heart hammering, suddenly certain of one thing. That single moment had not passed. It had been noticed, and whatever had noticed it was no longer willing to stay hidden. The rancher woke before dawn, though he couldn't remember falling asleep. His body felt heavy, as if the night had pressed its full weight onto his chest. The room was cold, far colder than it should have been, and the silence around him felt thick and deliberate. For a long moment he lay still, listening, waiting for some familiar sound to reassure him. There was nothing. No wind, no animals, no distant creak of the old house. It was as if the world outside his walls had been switched off. When he finally rose, his boots echoed too loudly against the floorboards. Every step felt exposed. He told himself again that guilt was playing tricks on him. That fear always grew sharper in the dark. But the ranch had never felt like this before. This land had been his life, his inheritance, something he understood in his bones. Now it watched him like a stranger. Outside, the morning light revealed something that made his stomach tighten. The cattle stood in a perfect line near the fence, their bodies rigid, their heads turned in the same direction, toward the house, toward him. They didn't move when he called out. Their eyes were dull, unblinking, reflecting the pale sky like glass. He stepped back slowly, the hairs on his arms rising as if he'd walked into a storm. As the day crawled forward, small disturbances followed him everywhere. Tools fell from hooks without being touched. Gates he had locked swung open on their own. In the barn, he heard breathing behind him. Slow and uneven, yet every time he turned, the space was empty. The smell of damp earth clung to the air, thick and suffocating, as if the ground itself had been freshly disturbed. He searched for her, hoping her presence might anchor him, might prove that the world hadn't truly slipped sideways. The room she'd been staying in was empty. Her bag was gone. Her boots were missing. Only the faint impression of her body remained on the mattress, as if she had vanished in a hurry. Guilt twisted deeper in his chest. Had she left because of him? Or had something else driven her away? That evening, as shadows stretched long across the land, the rancher found footprints near the edge of the property. Bare footprints, human-shaped but wrong, too deep. as if whatever made them was heavier than flesh should be. They circled the barn once, twice, then stopped abruptly at the door. He followed them inside, heart pounding, breath shallow. The barn doors slammed shut behind him. In the darkness, something shifted. Not rushed, not angry, patient. He felt it then, a presence that pressed against his thoughts, feeding on the moment he wished he could undo. A voice low and familiar, whispered through the air. Not accusing, not forgiving, simply reminding. You cannot take back what was felt. The rancher backed away, his hands trembling, finally understanding that the horror wasn't coming for him from the outside. It had already been invited in. The instant he crossed a line he hadn't known was there. By the third day, the rancher could no longer pretend the fear was temporary. It lived with him now, clinging to his breath, settling into his bones. Sleep came in fragments, torn apart by dreams that felt more like memories being rewritten. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw his own hand reaching out again, slower this time, heavier, as if guided by something other than instinct. He would wake gasping, his palms burning as though they had been pressed against hot iron. When he looked at his hands in the morning light, they didn't feel like his anymore. The skin appeared dull, almost gray, the lines deeper than he remembered. He scrubbed them raw under running water, but the sensation wouldn't leave. No matter how clean they were, he felt stained. The smell of iron followed him through the house, faint but unmistakable, like blood long dried into wood. The mirrors betrayed him first. When he passed one in the hallway, his reflection didn't move when he did. It lingered, watching. Its eyes filled with a calm that chilled him more than fear ever could. Then slowly the reflection smiled. He staggered back, heart hammering, and when he looked again, the mirror showed only his own exhausted face. He pressed his hands against the glass, half expecting it to ripple beneath his touch. The ranch itself seemed to tighten around him. Paths he had walked his entire life twisted into unfamiliar curves. Fences led nowhere. The road that ran straight toward town bent subtly, returning him again and again to the same old oak tree near the barn. It was as if the land refused to let him leave until something was settled. Every attempt to escape ended with him back where it had begun. At night the barn called to him. He could feel it, a pull in his chest that grew stronger after sunset. When he finally gave in, the doors opened without a sound, welcoming him into the dark. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with expectation. The horses stood motionless, their eyes reflecting nothing at all. Then he saw it. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, shaped exactly like him. Same height, same stance, same hands, but hollow as if carved from darkness and regret. It repeated the moment over and over, reaching out, gripping an invisible wrist, reliving the second that had birthed it. Each repetition felt like a blade sliding deeper into the rancher's chest. You felt it, the figure said in his own voice. So did the land. He fell to his knees, shaking, understanding finally that the horror had taken his form because it belonged to him. It was built from what he denied, what he minimized, what he wished to forget. The ranch wasn't punishing him out of cruelty. It was forcing him to face the weight of a single moment that could never be undone. And as the figure stepped closer, reaching out with hands that mirrored his own, the rancher realized the final truth. Running was no longer an option. Only reckoning remained. The night felt heavier than all the ones before it, as if the sky itself had lowered to press against the ranch. The rancher stood alone in the barn, the hollow figure still facing him, its outline flickering like a shadow caught between worlds. It did not rush. It did not threaten. That was what terrified him most. It waited, confident that there was nowhere left for him to turn. His legs gave way and he sank into the dirt. The earth was cold and damp, clinging to his knees, grounding him in the reality he had tried so desperately to avoid. His breath came in broken pulls as memories he had buried surfaced one by one. Not just that moment with her, but other times in his life when he had acted first and thought later, when he had believed good intentions were enough to excuse the weight of his actions. The figure seemed to grow clearer with each realization, its features sharpening as his denial dissolved. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though the words felt painfully small. The barn answered with a low groan, the wood flexing as if listening. The figure tilted its head, mirroring his movement exactly. Its hands lifted, palms open, showing nothing and everything at once. He understood then that apology alone wasn't what the land demanded. It wanted acknowledgement, ownership, truth spoken without defense. He pressed his trembling hands into the dirt and spoke again, louder this time. He named his fear, his guilt, his shame. He admitted that the harm of a moment didn't depend on how long it lasted or what he had intended. Each confession burned, stripping something away from him, leaving him raw and exposed. The air shifted. The pressure in the barn eased slightly, as if the land itself were breathing out. The figure began to change. Cracks spread across its surface, light seeping through the darkness. It staggered back, its expression no longer calm but fractured, unstable. When it screamed, the sound was not one of rage but release. Wind tore through the barn, flinging the doors open, scattering dust and straw into the night. When the noise finally died, the figure was gone. Dawn crept slowly over the hills, painting the ranch in soft gold. The animals stirred, uncertain but alive again. The oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the familiar sounds of morning. The rancher remained where he was for a long time, unable to move, his hands resting uselessly in his lap. They still trembled, and he knew they always would. Some lessons never fade completely. She never returned. Her absence became another truth he had to carry. The ranch remained, quiet and watchful, no longer hostile but forever changed, just as he was. He rose at last and stepped into the light, knowing the terror had passed. But the reminder would stay. Power, even in a single moment, leaves a mark, and the land, like memory, never forgets.